and let us all do we can to build a better future.
So last night, Glenn Greenwald and RFK Jr. were in a roundtable discussion talking about censorship and how journalists are now leading the forefront, especially corporate journalists, to be more precise, or dare I say corporate talent, have been on the front lines calling for more censorship and silencing whistleblowers. So before we play that video, and there's a huge video segment that I do want to play in regards towards the risk we're seeing with censorship, while I do not support the idea of supporting the Democratic Party, I do agree with RFK Jr.'s stance on censorship and being for the First Amendment. And now recently, before we play this video, a judge schedules an emergency hearing in RFK Jr.'s lawsuit over YouTube allegedly censoring his campaign. Now, we've seen this before with other politicians. We saw that with Tulsi Gabbard in the 2020 Democratic primary. But we're also seeing how, again, social media is on the warpath to silence third parties and independents. So with that, let's check out this article here from Fox News. This article came out on August 15th, just so we can get a clarity of understanding what's happening here. A judge will hold an emergency hearing Wednesday regarding Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s lawsuit alleging that YouTube censored his campaign. It wouldn't be the first time because YouTube is owned by Google, which is owned by Alphabet, which, again, silence and suppress Tulsi Gabbard's 2020 campaign. The campaign announced that federal magistrate Judge Nathaniel Cousins has set a hearing on Kennedy's request for a temporary restraining order barring Google from censoring his speech on YouTube during his 2024 presidential bid. It is scheduled to take place at 11 a.m. local time Wednesday at a federal courthouse in San Jose, California. Now, why is this important? Well, case in point, Kim Iverson, who is a very successful independent commentator who's had interviewed with a lot of politicians in the past, her interview with RFK Jr. was taken down. That's not the first time that's happened to anyone that's been covering RFK Jr. or his campaign. Now, again, obviously, YouTube has its guidelines and its rules, which are, I think, pointless. That's a discussion for another day, because then I could be rambling here all day in regards to how YouTube put the screws to Hard Lens Media. But there we go. Kennedy filed a complaint in the U.S. District Court, Northern District of California, against Google LLC, which is wholly a subsidiary of YouTube LLC, last week. The lawsuit alleges that Google worked with the federal government to develop and enforce misinformation policies that censor the government's political opponents, including Kennedy, who is running against President Biden in the Democratic primary. The complaint asserts that such actions violate the First Amendment when, as in this case, they result from public-private partnership that relies on government sources, and when the private party, Google, shares the government's censorship goals. Mr. Kennedy often speaks at length about topics people would like to ignore, including the negative health effects of toxic chemicals and potential safety concerns about, well, the jab. Again, have to be careful here because of YouTube's guidelines. Wouldn't be the first time. YouTube often removes videos of Kennedy's comments from its public platform. Again, there are numerous examples of this. It usually relies on its medical misinformation policies to justify the action. Gotta love that, right? The lawsuit continues. It has relied on these policies several times to censor interviews and speeches given by Mr. Kennedy during the 2024 presidential campaign, including a speech he gave at St. Anselm College in New Hampshire, a state that hosts America's first primary. On information and belief, it did so based on the statements from Biden administration about what information to censor. It will continue to do so throughout the presidential campaign, especially as the primary elections get closer. Again, if you run a Democratic primary, you're inviting yourself to an epic failure of a disaster. So I want to pull up this roundtable discussion that RFK Jr. Participated in with Glenn Greenwald and a few other individuals as well. So let's play this for some of you guys. I'm going to let RFK Jr. speak for the most part in this. Now, again, this whole segment is about an hour. I'm going to play 10 minutes into it, but I think for the first intro for the 10 minutes of this interview that took place and this roundtable discussion, it resonates to why we need to dismantle the influence of big tech and the two-party system. So let's play it for all you great people.
Heavy hand of censorship and insidious manipulation of our information. My name is Cheryl Atkinson. I'm a practicing investigative reporter, formerly CBS, CNN, PBS, still suing the government after its forensically proven intrusion into my computers as a CBS investigative correspondent. My independent weekly TV show now, Full Measure, is produced by Sinclair Broadcast Group. I'm going to give a brief introduction of tonight's panelists before each has a chance to make opening remarks. We'll go one by one, but first with our host, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a Democrat and candidate for president who recently, by the way, testified at a congressional hearing on censorship and the government's role. Kennedy has said that reinvigorating the First Amendment is at the heart of his presidential campaign. He has been widely censored, misrepresented, and smeared. A starting point to consider in the opening remarks, all of you, if you choose. Those who wish to censor claim to do this to protect us. They can have all the information they want, but they say that you can't have it and that's for your own good. In reality, the heart of censorship is control. So we're going to start, I think, by asking, what is it today that they are so desperate to control, and who are they? First, Bobby Kennedy.
Well, are you asking me to answer that question?
If you choose, you can comment however you wish, but I think in the overarching picture, we know something's going on, and it kind of begs the question, who are the people that are able to exert this kind of control, and what are they so afraid of?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, to me, is very opaque. I mean, we have right now 6 lawsuits going on, and they're against different entities. So we have lawsuits against Google and YouTube that we filed last week. We were scheduled for an expedited hearing this week, and it's and in that we're bringing a 1983 action, which are usually reserved for government agencies. But in this case, what we're alleging is that Google is actually Google and YouTube are acting as proxies for the government. So this is the state actor theory, but it goes to your point that there's been this bizarre cooperation between the big social media titans and the government, and it's hard to, and where we have the FBI and the CIA and a whole army of different government agencies, including the Census Bureau and the IRS. I don't know what the Census Bureau has to do with censorship or controlling information, but they were given portals into Twitter, into Facebook to literally censor people from speaking. We also have a successful suit in the state of Washington against a medical board that was silencing doctors, and particularly a Dr. Eggleston, who published something in the newspaper critical of the COVID countermeasures, and his license was pulled by the medical board.
Now, I want to pause it here for a second. And I want to rewind back the clocks to 2020. When the initial first wave of the jackboot of censorship was impacting content creators, I think many of us were caught off guard in regards to how quick and brutal it would be. We here at Heartlands Media, we have been hit not once, but 8 times since 2020. But the first time we got hit, for 6 months, we were demonetized, shadow banned. And again, it nearly could have been the end of Heartlands Media, were not for our viewers and subscribers and our allies in independent media. But I cannot tell all of you, just again, in just a matter of words, of just how precarious of a situation we are all in, especially when it comes time to tell the truth, to deliver content, and also speak our minds. But it's not only just content creators, people who just use social media as an activity to communicate or learn more or find out what's happening. They themselves can't speak freely because, again, if we look back at 2020, and I'm using this as an example, there was the infamous Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, anyone that tried to share that story on Twitter or Facebook, they were immediately told that they couldn't share it. Facebook and Twitter were doing everything they could to prevent any story whatsoever of relation to the Hunter Biden laptop to be posted on any social media page that was run by Twitter or Facebook. And as we found out, not only was the Hunter Biden laptop story correct and real, but we also found out that there were agencies that were working with Facebook and Twitter. Thanks to the Twitter files, shout out to Matt Taibbi, who keeps on speaking truth to power. And also shout out to that interview Joe Rogan did with Zuckerberg. It's horrifying to really think just about the influence of agencies and institutions on our social media. And of course, you have corporate media constantly beating the narrative or sharing the narrative with big tech because you cannot upset the establishment. It has to make me wonder if one day we will see the YouTube files, because there are certain names of individuals that you cannot say. There are certain stories that you just cannot do here on YouTube. And one has to wonder why exactly it's being put in place. And I just cannot help but walk down the path of thinking, oh, what would happen on Twitter and Facebook logically and realistically have to be taking place on YouTube as well. But this goes for all social media. And this is a danger when you have people in positions of power that want to dictate how you should think and feel. The censorship is all too real, and we need to stand against it now more than ever.
In the state of Maine, across the country, CHD is representing Merrill Nass, a highly respected local physician who also is one of the world's leading experts on bioweapons and on anthrax. The anthrax vaccine. She's testified 6 times before Congress. She's been quoted in the Washington Post, the New York Times, many other papers. She's highly revered both locally and internationally. And she published on her Substack articles that were critical of the COVID response, and the local medical board in Maine yanked her license and suspended her license for the last 19 months. And is slow walking her hearing. And then we have, we also have litigation against Twitter and against Facebook. Our Facebook case is in the Ninth Circuit. I argued that case almost a year ago, and we're waiting a decision on that. Based upon that case, the state actor theory, which is that, as we know, a news organization that chooses to makes a decision to censor people has no obligation to do otherwise. They can provide space to people that they want to provide space to, and it's their editorial decision. But when the government is asking them to do that, or requiring them to do that, or threatening them if they don't do it, and they become a government proxy, then the First Amendment is implicated. So we brought the Facebook case under that theory. Missouri versus Biden was brought by 2 attorney generals based upon our Facebook case. We also simultaneously filed a suit against President Biden under the same theory. I was the first person that President Biden began censoring 37 hours after he took the oath of office. People from the White House were calling Facebook and Twitter and threatening them that if they did not remove me, that they would that the White House would work to remove their Section 230 immunity. That is an existential threat to those organizations. So we filed a case that those.
Now, what's interesting here is that as soon as the Biden-Harris administration did ascend into power, as soon as they did start implementing their policies, not only were individuals such as RFK Jr. hit, but a lot of us who are on the lower end of the totem pole, basically we got buried alive. There are many content creators that are no longer on YouTube who are in the independent media sphere. There are many people who just gave up too. Now, unfortunately, since then, even after we recovered from our first 6 months, or technically we were back in operations after our first 6 months of being shadow banned and censored, we got hit 7 more times for many BS reasons, especially for videos that were 2 or 3 years old. Or we were hit and the YouTube algorithm made its accusation saying that we gave out misinformation, or we did we broke the guidelines somehow. And thankfully, shout out to Odyssey and Rumble, where we can get the copy version of our video live streams, as well as as well as for our clipped videos. We're able to show, no, you did not, YouTube. This we didn't break those guidelines here. We're able to show that. But that's what we've had to do. And every day, and I'm going to speak for myself, when I wake up, I do hope that everything is still operational and that our channel is still pushing forward. This concerns me because I'm seeing how the Democratic Party in particular, and yes, given the same power to the Republican Party, will do the same thing, because both parties are always going to be corrupt. They're inherently corrupt. It's abundantly clear. We know that both parties want to control the narrative. But I've been seeing how Democrats and their sycophants, the people who like to carry water for them, are on this super fast rush of censorship, silence, and suppression. I've been seeing firsthand how people have been going after independent media or third parties, saying they need to be silenced, they need to be censored, we don't need to hear their voices. Well, again, when you start silencing people, it means that you're afraid that we're speaking the truth. The establishment doesn't want you to think for yourself. The two-party system wants you to be silent, subservient, obedient. That's it. And if we allow that to happen, we lose our ability to really speak out. What we have before us, the internet, is a powerful tool that can be used for good, to inform and enlighten and uplift others and empower people to stand up against corruption. But those in power, in the establishment, in the media, in big tech, want to take that away from you.
Our case has now been consolidated with the two attorney generals' case. We had an argument this week in front of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals that went very, very well. The judges in that case, in that argument, were comparing the White House to the mafia. And so I'm very confident that we will win the Fifth Circuit. This will then go to the Supreme Court. There's a long answer to your question of who's doing this. Clearly, the government is involved, but there's involvement in other people. I want to mention one other lawsuit. I don't know if I've exceeded my time, but this is actually one of the most important ones to consider. There's an organization that we're suing called the Trusted News Initiative. The Trusted News Initiative was a secret collaboration that was organized by the BBC at the very, very beginning of the pandemic. In fact, there's evidence that they started organizing it in late 2019. The members of the Trusted News Initiative are the Washington Post, Reuters, the AP, all of the social media sites, and several other big news organizations from around the world. And they all agreed to play by a certain playbook, to censor any information that departed from government orthodoxies. Their motivation, and we have this from their discovery communications with each other, was venal. Really, it was that they see a lot of alternative news sites popping up all over the world, and
this is where independent media comes in, because here's where the interesting thing happens. Big tech and the establishment media despise independent media, free thinking media, those who fight for free speech, because we're able to say our minds. We're not there reading off a teleprompter. We're not there listening to advertisers. We're able to run our show freely and not worry about the jagoff people in power or a producer yelling in our ears. Again, if you look at corporate media, it's all the same. Click, copy, paste.
Believe that those news sites are responsible for taking their business, for eroding their business model, and also eroding public trust in the mainstream media. And so they decided to start an organization where they would crush alternative news sites who departed from official proclamations. And the way they did that is they had a branding system where any of them could report to the TNI, to the Trusted News Initiative, non-compliant organizations like my organization, CHD, Green Med Info, Dr. Mercola, many, many others. And that then those groups would be banned by the social media sites. The social media sites all signed on to this. And that would destroy their businesses. So they literally put out of business many, many, many small organizations using that methodology. And so, you know, going back to your original question, who's doing it? It is a collaboration, and there are, and I think one of the most disturbing involvements is the consistent involvement in the intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies, both in the United Kingdom and in our country, in the censorship.
All right. So I want to pull up another video part of this segment here. And again, you can watch the full video. It's in the show notes in the live stream in the description box below. But also, I want to pull up Glenn Greenwald's commentary. And again, shout out to Turncoat Don. Glenn Greenwald noting how surreal it is that journalists are leading the charge for increased censorship. So let's play it.
I think we have to pause and realize what a surreal circumstance it is that the leading censorship advocates in the United States are people who have as their label with human resources inside gigantic media corporations the job title journalist. I mean, for me, for a journalist to advocate for censorship is like hearing a cardiologist encourage people to smoke more cigarettes. It is so anathema to the core values and functions of what journalism is supposed to be. But they have absolutely played a crucial role in that. And now, most disturbingly at all, it's not just the political wings of the government, but the U.S. security state. We know from the Twitter file reporting, we know from a lot of other reporting independent of that as well, that it is a frequent action of the CIA, of Homeland Security, of the FBI to have these regular lines of communication with every single big tech company where they're constantly identifying content they claim is a threat to national security or in some other way dangerous. And obviously, if the FBI or the CIA comes knocking at your door as a private corporation and threatens you or tells you that content that you're not censoring is a threat to the national security or in some other way dangerous, you're going to.
And again, I'm going to rewind that back. But again, when you have federal agencies going to Facebook and Twitter, and dare I say it, maybe to all social media, and telling them what is allowed to be posted and what is not allowed to be posted, it should concern all of you. Which is why, again, I have to say, for all those who were insulting independent media for us covering the Hunter Biden laptop story, what's it like to eat crow? For all those who've been saying that the way the administration was handling the pandemic, what's it like knowing that the administration and our politicians were never going to fight for us? This whole idea and talk of somehow that our politicians care about us or have a plan or that they were going to look out for us. I mean, again, the only reason why many Americans were parroting that is because, one, people were afraid, and two, corporate media was, again, intensifying the sound, not only in traditional media, but on big tech as well. And what do we see before us now? We have the establishment media trying to say to all of us now that third parties are a danger, that they're spoilers, that they're going to steal votes. But how can you spoil something that's already rotten? How can you steal a vote that never belonged to you in the first place that you have to earn? We have the establishment media saying that the economy is doing great. Hey, let's have democracy in the chat. How is the economy treating you? Type 1 if it's great for you. Type 2, like, no, I don't know how I'm going to make it past tomorrow. I wonder how many 2s we're going to get in the chat. I wonder. We also have the establishment media at first saying that Ukrainian counteroffensive is going to push back Russia. Let me let y'all on a little bit of a secret, and this is going to probably trigger the vote blue no matter who people. But I do it. I do it just to really trigger them. I do it just to really get them upset. And this is just me being petty. Here's from RT. U.S. intelligence believes Ukraine's counteroffensive will fail. From none other than the most trusted news source, Democracy Dies in Darkness, the Washington Post. U.S. intelligence agencies have made a grim assessment of Ukraine's ongoing counteroffensive, believing that Kiev will fail to plunge south toward the Crimean Peninsula by the end of the year, according to the Washington Post. Now, again, all this talk, how it's going to push, and you got to send in those Leopard tanks, those Abram tanks, and somehow it's going to happen. Look, this is me being an armchair general, but tactics and strategy 101 says, you don't tell people, your opponent, like, hey, we're going to do a counteroffensive on this day. It's usually a surprise. You catch them with the pants down. But remember, just a few months before, how corporate media was saying that that counteroffensive was going to do great. The economy's doing great. Corporate media would never lie to you. Let's rewind this back. And again, if you are a whistleblower, you're the enemy of the state.
A claim is a threat to national security or in some other way dangerous. And obviously, if the FBI or the CIA comes knocking at your door as a private corporation and threatens you or tells you that content that you're not censoring is a threat to the national security or in some other way dangerous, you're going to take that very, very seriously. And so you have this confluence of forces operating in conjunction with one another. They're not operating independently. They're very much unified toward the same goal of not just imposing a censorship regime, but one that is designed to silence dissidents to establishment orthodoxies. It often understood as being directed at the right. I don't think that's the right way to understand it. It does fall heavily on the right a lot of times, but lots of left-wing or just independent voices who question establishment orthodoxies on the war in Ukraine or COVID or January 6th or the 2020 election, basically every important debate that we have are systematically censored in a way that has become completely normalized. And to me, I think that is, if not the gravest menace to our core liberties, certainly one of them.
Exactly. So what can we take away from this? The current infrastructure of our two-party system, the current infrastructure of our media, the current infrastructure of big tech is designed to control a narrative to keep us quiet, to keep us pushing along. But see, that sounds good on paper for the establishment. But in reality, all of us, no matter where we stand on the political spectrum, no matter where we live in this world or even in this country here in America, no matter what generation we're part of, each of us are dealing with challenges that are understandably out of our control. And because of that, this big impact of neoliberal policies that have been devastating communities for decades and decades, well, finally, everything is starting to hatch out. And people want to speak out about it. People want to talk about the unchecked corruption. People want to talk about these dynastic families that are doing insider trading. People want to talk about the insidious way our media and our politicians are censoring and suppressing information. People want to talk about why things are the way they are. People want to talk about how, again, for so long we've been asking for accountability and we're getting nothing in return. The American idea of free speech is important for our republic. It's in a way in which we can express our ideas and uplift and empower each other. And the press, theoretically, should be leading the front lines. We should have journalists out there. We should have these media outlets out there calling out these jagoff politicians, holding them accountable. But because we have politicians that are so corrupt, because we have a Supreme Court that allowed Citizens United because it shouldn't be a thing, those in power, those who have resources, finances like Wall Street, big banks, hedge fund managers, corporations, bought the media. And in turn, by buying the media, they're now once again dictating to us how we should feel. And because of that, just so you all know, the same people who control the media also control Democratic politicians and Republican politicians. And the only way we're going to get out of this is by us speaking out. If we just go along and say, this is just fine and you're okay with the way current events are playing out, then all of us are going to fall one by one. Now, I do wish RFK Jr. all the best with his lawsuit against YouTube and Google. I know Tulsi Gabbard tried to do the same thing too, but it requires dedication, and it's a huge fight. I do wonder if and when there will ever be a YouTube Files or a Google Files. It would be interesting to see how that plays out. But nonetheless, now's the time to support independent media, and now's the time to stand in solidarity for free speech. On yesterday's show, I talked about how Glenn Beck's program on Apple was taken down. Now it's been restored. That's great. I didn't like the fact that it was taken down with no explanation. But hey, Apple iTunes, could you please restore Lee Camp's content? Could you please, take care of him too? Again, I don't want to see anyone get censored. Libertarians, Greens, Socialists, Republicans, Democrats. I don't want to see that, because as soon as you open up the floodgates and put people on the chopping block to be censored and suppressed, all of us are going to be put on that chopping block then. And that's not a bright future I want to be part of.